Welcome to the Curious Platypus. I'm Michael Edward, and today's piece is titled 10 Things I Got Out of Studying Philosophy That Weren't a Job. One of the more amusing things about studying philosophy at university is that whenever anyone finds out your major, they always ask the same question. What kinds of jobs can you get out of a philosophy degree? And anyone who has ever completed a degree in philosophy knows that the honest answer to that question is fuck all. Or maybe I'm being a bit too hasty. After all, there's always the chance of nabbing the rapidly disappearing role of Professor of Philosophy at one of the few and far between universities that still offer such an antiquated major. Other than that, though, there aren't many employers looking for people who know a whole lot about Plato's opinions on the surface. So why is this question so amusing to those of us silly enough to complete a philosophy degree? In short, it piques our feather-ruffling proclivities. See, one of the many things us philosophers enjoy is peering behind the veil of normal social convention to examine why people think the way they do. And so putting aside the obvious point that people who ask this question are just being friendly, it is rather telling that the prevailing question most people ask is about employability. I mean, the fact that countless people have asked me what type of job I will get once I finish my education, and no one has ever asked me if what I learnt was beneficial to my life, highlights the way we see education, as nothing more than a means to an economic end. Which is sad, because even though I didn't waltz straight into a job once I completed my degree, that doesn't mean I didn't get a whole bunch of soul-enriching things out of it. But since no one has ever asked me what those things were, I thought I'd share some of them here. 1. Deeper understanding. Studying philosophy helped me see that history is about a whole lot more than just wars, plagues, and space races. One way of explaining what us philosophers do at university would be to say we study the history of ideas. We study how the ancient Greeks' ideas of democracy shaped the way we set up our political system. We study how Marx's ideas about the economic system led people to advocate for communism. We study how the scientific revolution changed the way humans thought about their place in the cosmos, and the implications this had on our moral, existential, and religious ideas. In other words, we explore how the ideas of the past shaped not only our world, but also the way we think. It is hard to explain just how much this helped me piece things together to arrive at a greater sense of equanimity. It helped me solidify how I understand my place in the world, which helped me make sense of a lot of the bigger questions that nagged at me. I also gained a deeper level of understanding about why I think the way I do, why society holds certain values and eschews others, and how we got to this point. And although enriching my understanding of the history of ideas didn't help me change the here and now, it did give me a better sense of where I want to go in the future. 2. Epistemic humility. Put simply, epistemology is the study of knowledge, or as my philosophy professor used to say, it is the study of how we know what we know. And as it turns out, philosophy taught me that we do not know anywhere near as much as we'd like to think we do. Not only that, but a lot of what we do know is questionable to say the least. Despite our scientific understanding and our vast computing power, all knowledge is still constrained by the way humans interface with reality and by the way we think. Which means there aren't just things we may never understand, but that so much of what we do understand has to be squeezed through a tiny filter that is walled by culture, language, our cognitive capabilities, and the false assumptions of the past that are yet to be identified. What's more, some philosophers have even suggested that knowledge is only as solid as the civilization in which it's constructed. For example, there are civilizations that have existed in the past who would have seen their knowledge as undeniable truths. And just like we do now, they would have believed that their knowledge about physical reality, their place in the cosmos, and so much more was solid. And yet once those civilizations collapsed, so too did much of their knowledge. This highlights how so much of our knowledge is not something that exists out there in the universe waiting to be discovered. Instead, it is created by one civilization and burned down by another. And there really is no reason to assume that the ideas and theories our civilization has created are the only ways to understand reality. In fact, they may be precisely what's leading us astray. This doesn't mean that epistemology argues that there is no truth, or that knowledge obtained through disciplines like science isn't valuable. Instead, the value of epistemology is that it helps keep us in check by reminding us of the limits of our knowledge. 3. Not that simple. A common complaint I hear about philosophy is that it's too abstract, too analytical, too concerned with irrelevant distinctions and subtle nuances, which apparently means it never gets to the bloody point. And while some philosophers have been known to talk the brown off of shit, there is a damn good reason for this. Nothing is as simple as we'd like it to be. Doing deep dives into the many different theories that surround a certain idea, and then exploring how and why those philosophers came up with their specific theories, and then examining all the assumptions, prior knowledge, and implications embedded in those theories, and then pitting those different theories against each other to see which ones hold the most weight, made me realize just how complex even the most seemingly simple ideas really are. It made me understand that the reason philosophers never get to the bloody point is because if you want to rush to the point, then you're not actually doing any idea justice. You're just glossing over a myriad of important details and ignoring all the depth contained within every topic so you can quickly get to an answer. Through philosophy, I realized that the human tendency to oversimplify things is incongruous with the infinitely complex universe in which we find ourselves, and that universal statements about absolute truths are harder to come by than philosophers who just get to the bloody point. 4. Respect for religion. When I was younger, my friends and I used to make strawman oversimplifications about religion. We used to think it was ridiculous that anyone would believe in a big daddy in the sky. In our ignorance, we'd take stories from the Bible literally and pick them apart, instead of seeing them for what they really are, metaphors to help guide people through perennial problems. Obviously, we were just naive shitheads, but the fact remains that until I studied philosophy, I did not understand or appreciate the value of religion. For any atheists out there, relax. I'm not going to try and convert you. Because the truth is, I'm still not sure what I believe. All I know is that philosophy helped me consider the religion argument with more depth. It illuminated how humans have a tendency for worship deep within us. And even though not as many people worship a traditional deity anymore, that doesn't mean our desire to worship went away. I mean, you can find people who worship money, power, progress, sex, science, drugs, alcohol, art, and basically anything else you can hold a candle to. In my own life, I have seen this to be true because as a lifelong skateboarder, I would be lying if I said I haven't deified that plank of wood. And while I think people should be able to worship whatever the hell they want, philosophy helped me see how Nietzsche's death of God is one of the main factors that has contributed to our current meaning crisis. See, although many of us hold the things we worship near and dear to us, most of them don't house all the beneficial aspects of an organized religion. Science can't teach us how to act morally. Our political party can't help us with questions about the afterlife. All the money and power in the world won't quell our existential angst. And even though part of me likes to think it does, my skateboard doesn't offer up that much spiritual advice. Which means we have nowhere to turn to find guidance to help us deal with the divine dimension of our lives that our secular age can't seem to satisfy. Point being, believe in religion or not, there is a value to having faith. 5. Boundaries of thought. Maybe I was naive to think this, but before studying philosophy, I just kind of assumed the people of the past thought similarly to the way we do now. The reason I thought this was because I had never really grasped the extent to which we are molded by our time, place, and culture. Studying philosophy opened my eyes to how our thinking is bounded by our thrownness, as Heidegger put it. We are thrown into a certain place at a certain time, and the culture of that time defines how we think. So much so that our thinking ends up conforming to certain rules, patterns, and preconceived ideas, all of which are predicated on how our culture has come to understand things. And you might be saying, duh, but here's what I find confronting. Since we are all products of our time, it is essentially impossible for us to think outside the rules, patterns, and preconceived ideas that serve as boundaries of our thought. After all, how can we think outside these boundaries when these boundaries are the very tools we use to think? It is as if our hands are tied. I mean, try to think about any abstract idea without the language, metaphors, and reasoning skills your culture gave you. Try to think about the way you understand reality without employing some scientific or mathematical understanding. Try to explain how or why something happened without defaulting to the idea of cause and effect or the belief in linear time. It's not that it can't be done. Besides, that's what luminaries have always done, broken through these boundaries and delivered us to new paradigms of thought. But for many, myself included, just becoming aware of these boundaries is a mind-bending endeavor. 6. Limits of language. It wasn't until I was exposed to the work of Ludwig Wittgenstein, a 20th century philosopher of language, that I really grasped the extent to which the language of our birth acts as a sort of cage that defines how we think. I mean, if there isn't a word for something, good luck making sense of it, much less conveying it to someone else. And while I wish I could delve into more detail on this quandary, there is far more that needs to be said than what I can fit to the scope of this piece. But what I can say is that learning about how integral language is to our thinking made me a strong proponent of free speech, because if you limit language, you limit thought. What's more, since I had to write my ideas in clear and cogent ways, or at least as clear as I could, I was able to grasp the value of using writing to better understand what I think. Learning to contend with the limits of language also made me feel better about my inability to convey some of my more ineffable feelings and experiences. And it helped me realize that sometimes figuring out how to play within the limits is what makes something beautiful. 7. Accepting existential angst. Questions like, why am I here? Who am I really? And what should I be doing? Used to cloud my mind. My distress at the paradoxical and contradictory answers I'd hear, coupled with my desire to figure it all out, was actually one of the many reasons I decided to study philosophy in the first place. Back then, I naively believed that maybe philosophy had some answers. Boy, was I wrong. Not because philosophy isn't full of people who've had all kinds of opinions on these matters, but because I mistakenly believed that someone beyond myself could deliver me answers to questions that everyone must figure out for themselves. Studying philosophy didn't answer my questions, but it did help me realize that these questions are actually gifts that drive us deeper. It showed me that spending a lifetime trying to form personal answers to these questions is an intrinsic and valuable part of being human. Reading how some of philosophy's greatest minds struggled with these problems also made me feel less alone, because it showed me that people who I respected had also spilled plenty of ink trying to answer these unanswerable questions. 8. Confidence to share ideas. Being exposed to so many different ideas from a whole range of different philosophers and seeing how so many of these ideas move things forward for a time only to be refuted and replaced by the next person helped me come to terms with something I'd always struggled with, being bold enough to put my ideas out there. Like everybody, I have a bunch of ideas, theories, and opinions about a whole range of things. Some of these ideas are grounded in my own experience, and some aren't grounded in much at all. But before I studied philosophy, the thing all my ideas had in common was that I didn't dare share them. I was too scared of being wrong, of being ridiculed, or of mumbling my way through a poor explanation. Studying philosophy helped me overcome this fear in two ways. The first was that there weren't many people in my philosophy classes, which meant I couldn't just hang back and avoid putting my 2 cents in when the class broke into discussions. Instead, I had to participate. And in philosophy class, that meant stating my interpretations and opinions on the text. And as I progressed through my degree, I noticed that my confidence grew. I went from someone who tried his best to hang back to someone who was ready and willing to voice his ideas. Secondly, realizing how incredibly complex and to some degree unknowable many things are, coupled with the fact that some of the greatest minds in history have gotten a whole bunch of things wrong, helped me embrace the idea that no one really knows what the fuck is going on. Which, as it turns out, gave me a new level of confidence to share my own ideas. Because if none of us really know anything for sure, and if most of us are wrong most of the time, then the least we can do is boldly state our opinions on the battlefield of ideas to see which ones are strong enough to stand up to criticism. 9. Belonging. Something that drew me to philosophy was that I have always been unendingly curious. I want to know everything about everything. But most importantly, I want to know why. Why I act that way, why I think that way, why we design society that way. To me, why is the quintessential question. In this way, I feel like I'm still a small child who never grew out of the stage where everything I heard and every explanation I was given was followed by the word why. Which unsurprisingly gets on people's nerves. Take it from me, people don't really like it when you constantly question their every move. And so much to my dismay, I found that the best thing to do so I don't piss everyone off was to try silence the eternal questioner within. But doing that hurts. It means I have to suppress a fundamental part of who I am, which makes me feel isolated, alienated, and as if there is something wrong with me. So imagine how wonderful I felt when I found a bunch of ceaseless questioners just like me in philosophy class. Imagine my relief when I heard other philosophy students ask weird and abstract why questions that I knew from experience would irk most people. Imagine how nice it was to finally be in a place where I didn't feel like the annoying weirdo who was getting on everyone's nerves. This was something I never expected to get out of philosophy. I went looking for answers to my ceaseless questions, and I found a sense of belonging amongst a group of ceaseless questioners. 10. Writing. Early in my degree, I was met with an issue that deters many people from continuing to engage with philosophy. Long-winded, jargon-heavy, hard-to-follow writing. There is no doubt that if you want people to be receptive of your ideas, you have to package them well. But apparently, some philosophers didn't get the memo. But that doesn't mean you should throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. I mean, if you watch a shitty movie, it's not like you decide to never watch movies again. Engaging with philosophical texts should be the same. Because for every boring philosophy book, there are just as many that will resonate with the deepest parts of your soul. There are philosophers who exercise such incredible skill with the written word that their summations of humanity's tireless search for meaning in an indifferent universe is so moving that to never read such words just because you dismissed philosophy too early would be a downright travesty. Reading the likes of Camus, Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Emerson, Thoreau, Wallace, and Orwell, just to name a few, is like having your deepest thoughts and feelings conveyed back to you in a way that makes you feel seen and understood like never before. Beyond making me feel less alone, engaging with writing of this caliber also inspired me to try my hand at writing. Something about reading the works of these great writers made me want to try write something that spoke to others in a way their writing had spoken to me. And luckily for me, the name of the game when it comes to doing assignments for a philosophy degree is writing essays, which meant my degree literally pushed me to delve deeper into my newfound passion. Before long, I found myself writing pieces which had nothing to do with my degree. Almost overnight, I began pouring my heart out through my pen as I relayed all the thoughts and feelings I had about my other great love, skateboarding. At the time, I didn't have a plan for what I was writing. I was just enjoying it. It was just this new outlet for me to express myself. And I took to it like a fat guy to pizza. But as time went on, almost without me even knowing it, I realized I was writing a book about my much-loved skateboarding. Even though nowadays my philosophy degree is well and truly behind me, and even though it still hasn't landed me a job, I find myself engaging with philosophy more and more. I do this not only because I enjoy it, but also because I know the ideas and lessons it exposes me to are enriching my life. I am also deeply grateful for philosophy as it helped me come to think of myself as a writer who has finally found a medium that allows him to address that amusing question of what kinds of jobs can you get out of a philosophy degree in his own roundabout and philosophical way.